What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the altar again, and this time we return. We continue our yearly tradition with Dino of Fear Factory. Great to have you here, man.
Thank you for having me here, man. I appreciate it, and I'm enjoying the artwork behind you.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's an honor. It's funny too. One thing I just realized this when we confirmed this interview. I've interviewed you every year since launching this channel, but none of the times I've interviewed you were in New York, which I just find really ironic.
But I've seen you in New York.
Yep, you definitely have. You definitely have.
So we're gonna have to change next time I'm there. I'll be there next year.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And it's funny you bring that up too, because I want to tell you this. The show that you did at Irving Plaza was extraordinary. First of all, your new singer is absolutely kick-ass and completely executed the parts. It exceeded every expectation I had. Tony was killing it. Just an all-out epic performance. And playing with Static X and Mushroom Head and Dope, which is a sick lineup, did that really feel like almost a blast from the past in a way?
Definitely. I mean, it was like like part of the resurgence of nu metal. You know what I mean? Of course, because Dope and Mushroom Head and Static X, and of course that we were definitely the earlier part of that. You know what I mean? Before Static X or any of those bands got signed. As a matter of fact, I was the one who brought Static X to Roadrunner Records.
Oh, really?
To Monty Connor, yeah. But Monty Connor lost them to Warner Brother Records, so. Yeah, so that was when the whole LA scene was coming out with some great music back in the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Back in '95, and from about '94 to like '99, there was a whole slew of bands in that genre coming out, and I was right there, and I was happy to be a part of it, and I was just trying to get bands that I knew signed, because a lot of A&R guys were out here looking for bands, and Monty Connor at Roadrunner Records was like, hey, if you know some of those bands, send me some of those demos. And so I did. I sent them Spine Shank, System of a Down, Static X. I'm probably leaving, who am I leaving out? Cold Chamber.
Yep.
Cold Chamber, and later on in the 2000s, I brought them In This Moment.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
And a band called Earshot.
Earshot. I've heard that name before. That's awesome. I had no idea with In This Moment. That's really cool. I saw In This Moment. I remember too. It was in 2011. It was Korn, Disturbed, Seven Dust, and they were opening. Nobody really knew who they were, and it was before they had all their production that they have now. And now they're just an all-out behemoth of a band. So
exactly, a huge behemoth of the band, and I think that Roadrunner made a mistake not signing that band, but it is what it is. But you got to remember when In This Moment put out their first record, they were a much different band.
Yeah, they were like a Warped Tour band when they first started.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but they kind of more had like a Kill Switch Engage with female vocals.
Yep, pretty much.
That's how I looked at it.
Yeah, they were kind of good at the time because the sort of metalcore, the late metalcore bands with that we've seen in Britain with the rise of Asking Alexandria and stuff. They kind of were marketed towards that audience, but then I think after that Disturbed tour, they kind of got more quote unquote radio friendly, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was.
Yeah, but it's still heavy. It's still heavy.
Oh yeah, you there are people who will listen to their softest song and think it's devil music. But it's funny you mentioned that too, kind of with the blast in the past, because we've talked extensively about origins of Fear Factory in the early days of the scene. But Fear Factory has always been kind of associated with the Static X's and Spine Shanks and that sort of nu metal scene in a way. But with how heavy you guys were, I mean, you've done tours with the Obituaries and the Niles and the death metal bands as well. And, you've toured with Typo Negative, and now you're about to embark on a tour with Lacuna Coil, one of my personal favorite bands as well. So, it seems like Fear Factory was really never a pigeonholed band in a way. It seems like you were almost kind of like the minority, and you were in the nu metal scene, but you really kind of kept your foot in the underground as well.
Well, and it could be a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is that we could branch out and play with a bunch of different bands. That was good. But the bad thing is that we never belonged to one genre. You understand what I'm saying?
I always think that that's a good thing in a way, though.
Yeah, it can be, but if that genre, if we were a part of a new metal genre, maybe we would have been as big as some of those new metal bands.
Maybe, yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think that we were, it almost seemed like sometimes we were too heavy for the new metal fans, and then maybe, maybe not new metal enough, but maybe we were too new metal fans for the heavier fans. You know what I mean? So I don't know. We kind of sat in between. We were like a snake in between all those bands and all those different genres. So we were kind of like right there, even though, what we created later on, not even just later on, but just what we created over the years was something that would inspire all those different bands.
Absolutely.
Mainly in the syncopated kick and guitar, music, and then obviously the vocals inspiring all those different types of genre. Maybe some of those genres don't even know where it came from, right?
Yeah.
Because they might have been listening to Killswitch Engage, even though Killswitch Engage was kind of more, the formula of the vocals was very much, inspired by Fear Factory.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes a new generation of fans emerge, and a new style of music emerges, and people don't really know the history of where it all started.
Yeah.
But if you go back, it comes. Some of that stuff stems from Fear Factory, and going into bands later on like Killswitch and All That Remains and so on and so on. There's a million bands like that.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like Pantera with the groove, and then Fear Factory with the vocals.
Yep. It pretty much.
And then,
I never thought Fear Factory, like, I'm a metalcore freak for life. Like, that was the shit I grew up with, and that what got me into it. And, like, I never thought, I discovered Fear Factory much later, but upon learning about you and the history, I felt like that was one thing, people really do pay a lot of tribute to Fear Factory with how they influenced their guitar playing. I know a lot of people who are playing 7 strings because of you, and like, a lot of influence. But I don't think the metal. Every time I talk to like the old school metalcore bands, the Killswitch, Shadows Fall, Unearthed, they mention like At the Gates and like New York City hardcore. But like, I mean, Demanufacture was out, Obsolete was all out when those bands started. So.
Yeah. I've had the guys in Killswitch, come up to me and telling me that.
Okay. But when it comes to like the whole, because you also had your foot in the industrial scene too. I've heard Fear Factory music played at like goth clubs right after they're playing Sisters of Mercy and like The Cure. So.
Yeah. And so we kind of had our foot in the door in all these different genres. And in some ways, I almost felt like it hurt us because we weren't just one thing. Because right now there's like a resurgence of death metal, a resurgence of new metal, but there's no resurgence of what the metal we do.
Yeah. Yet. We need some Fear Factory disciples.
It's like, it's kind of weird that we're not part of the resurgence of death metal or new metal because we weren't just those type of things.
But it's got to be cool to say that you were your own animal, though, at the same time. Not a lot of bands can really say that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean...
Metallica can't even say that.
I'm just saying that we had a whole different... that we were a part of all of it, in a way. Like I said, we had our foot in the door in all those different genres, but... We didn't particularly fit into one genre.
Yeah.
And that to me could have been, part of the reason why we're not part of a resurgence of certain genres.
I think with the new vocalists on board, though, it really brought like a new lease of life to the band, actually, because again, not only did I think he pulled off those vocal parts, I'll confess as, somebody who's talked, part of me was, a little nervous, how is this going to pull off after listening to so many, listening to your previous vocals for so many years, but like, he pulled it off like perfectly. And the way that his stage presence was incredible. Has Milo also maybe showed you some new things as well, maybe exposed you to some new ideas?
Not necessarily yet.
Okay.
Because we're just barely getting into the new record. So, but he's definitely, has a young Burton sound to him.
Yeah.
Definitely. Where Burton was probably in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think Milo is, as far as his vocal style and what he's doing out there live. You know what I mean? And he's killing it, and on new tracks as well. So it's only a matter of time. I'm going to say, unfortunately, not till next year you're going to hear new music with his vocals on it.
Well, you know what? It'll be worth the wait, because hearing that shit live just made me more excited for it. So the anticipation begins now.
But it's funny because we're getting offered like all these different types of tours. We've never once got offered a Lacuna Coil tour at all.
And I think that's an epic lineup. For me personally,
I think part of it is because Milo's Italian.
Hey, new market right there. New market right there.
Exactly. And trust me, I'm extremely excited to be, out there touring. Going to be touring with Lacuna Coil. It's going to be great. I can't wait for that.
First concert ever was them. So.
And we also have some other big announcements for next year too.
Oh,
which I can't say yet.
Yeah.
And this next tour next year is going to be a heavyweight. It's going to be a great tour.
Oh man, I'm gonna lose sleep now until this is announced. So thank you, but
it'll be announced next month.
Okay, worth the wait. And next month's my birthday, so good birthday present. But
and this is for a tour that's happening early next year. So
good enough. Good enough.
Yeah.
But circling back to the whole nu metal thing too, I never understood in a way. And as somebody who I've said it myself, I love nu metal, but you guys never sounded like Limp Bizkit, and they never sounded like Deftones. They never sounded like Korn. They never sounded like System of a Down, and they never sounded like Slipknot. So, like, what is it? Does nu metal have to have like something that ties it all together?
Yeah, but Slipknot had those kind of riffs that were very nu metal riffs, right? I mean, even though they didn't sound like those bands you mentioned didn't sound like each other at all. But I think Slipknot was. Of some of the riffs came from that style.
Yeah, and Korn as well.
What do you mean?
Like, I think Korn, when you opened up with Blind, that kind of had that, like, that signature nu metal riff. They say, like, the way that, like, I heard somebody say, and it could be a very obscure analogy, but somebody said one time that, like, the opening to Blind by Korn was basically, like, the first time people heard Tony Iommi's riff in Black Sabbath, and that defined like heavy metal in a way, which I think is a little too much smoke.
Well, there's a lot of similarities, and it kind of goes back to the early 90s, before Korn. We started out in 1990, even though on the internet it says 1989. Not true. Mm-hmm. We started in 1990, October, and we were never called Ulceration. We were called Fear Factory. Ulceration was a project band that I had. So back then, I knew a guy named Ross Robinson. This is before Korn, before any of that stuff. I knew Ross Robinson. Ross Robinson produced our first demo, which later on became the Hate Files. I'm sorry, Concrete record.
Okay, because this was predating Soul of a New Machine.
Yeah, that, and he produced one of our demos and stuff like that. And the demo had Scapegoat on it. And Scapegoat had that ga-gun, 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 ga-gun. It's very much like Blind, of course, years before Blind.
Yeah.
So Blind was ours was ga-gun, 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 ga-gun.
Yep.
Which later on, Cold Chamber had a similar riff. Slayer had a similar riff. And I was like really surprised how far that type of riffing went. You know what I mean? Maybe there was somebody before me that wrote that riff. I never heard it, but I was inspired more. When I wrote that song, I was inspired by Helmet. Helmet put out their very first record called Strap It On It wasn't a big record, and a lot of people don't know it, but it had some really heavy fucking groove riffs on that record.
Yeah.
And I believe, I'm going to say that came out in 1990 or 1991. And I was listening to that record and I was like, holy shit, that's fucking such a fucking, that type of riffing was fucking big on that record. And so that inspired me to write a song like Scapegoat, which later on sounded like Blind, and then which later on sounded like Cold Chamber, and then later on it sounded like Slayer.
Yep. And after Slayer put out Diabolus in Musica, I can literally say that Tom Araya is my favorite rapper. So,
But you heard, obviously you know what I'm talking about,
yeah,
the song.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so, yeah, and I've gotten condemned for saying that many, many times. A lot of people got mad at me for saying, hey, you know, Blind sounds like this riff, blah, 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 you know, of a Fear Factory riff that was before that. And a lot of people got mad at me, but I still say it because I believe to be true.
Yeah, it's on the internet, so it's true. And speaking of sick riffs, though, you also reissued Mechanize and The Industrialist this year. I still think, to this day, might be my top 3 Fear Factory songs. I think Disassemble has some of the best riffs ever, just in general. I can't get enough of that song. I think New Messiah has epic riffs on it. And then, I can't pronounce the title, but off Mechanize, Christoplian or something like that.
No, Christploitation.
Christploitation. Thank you. But, like, I'm just, with the reissuing of that, as, you know, you've done with Obsolete and Demanufacture with, you know, the sort of, like, re-envisioning of it, and as you just recently done with Aggression Continuum as well, like, I'm just wondering, sort of with the concept, first off, with the advent of ChatGPT and everything, and I've mentioned it to you every time we speak, you predict the future with Fear Factory, because as soon as I got a ChatGPT account, I put on The Industrialist. But I'm just wondering, that with that record aging like fine wine, do you have like a different perspective on Mechanize and The Industrialist? Because with Mechanize, it was you coming back into Fear Factory and so on and so forth.
Well, Mechanize was definitely very influenced by what I was doing in Divine Heresy.
Yep.
Because I was doing Divine Heresy for a couple of albums, and so when I came back into Fear Factory, I was like, we need to bring back Fear Factory heavy as fuck. And so that's why I wrote Mechanize album the way I did. And The Industrialist, I feel that, you know, I thought the record was great. You know, we did get a lot of backlash for using a drum program back then, and then redoing it with live drums and then changing some of the guitar tones and a couple little parts here and there. I thought gave that record a resurgence, man, because it sounds amazing.
Yeah, I thought it was, I mean, I feel like you could get away, I don't like talking about like the whole backing track debate, but with the industrial sound that you have and this sort of futuristic sound, I feel like it almost kind of has to, like you could almost get away with that in a way, right?
Well, you would think that, but we didn't. A lot of people got really upset about not having a live drummer.
Yeah, I mean, you've always had a history of great drummers, so I could see, but like and after having Gene Hoglan on Mechanize, maybe there was like expectations that had to have been met, but still, I thought that.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of those songs were written. A lot of the songs on Mechanize were written with a drum machine that I had Gene play. You know, for instance, Power Shifter. That was, you know, most of that is a drum program that I wrote. Then I would just show Gene the beats and then he would play it. So it wasn't like, you know, there's songs on there, Designing the Enemy. That's all drum programming. That's not even Gene on that song.
Wow. I mean, I couldn't tell in a way, so you clearly worked it well. So
Designing the Enemy and Metallic Division. That's not Gene at all.
Wow. It worked. I couldn't tell. I didn't know until you just told me. So that's really interesting. And you mentioned Divine Heresy, so I got to ask this. Can we be expecting anything from that? I heard you were re-envisioning it. If you're allowed to say, I got to ask, because to this day, Bleed the Fifth and Bringer of Plagues, I love Fear Factory, but those are my 2 favorite compositions you worked on.
Yes, but my main goal right now is to do a new Fear Factory record. That's the main thing. Okay. We got so much touring coming up. We have a lot. We have some headlining dates. We got the Luke Kunakol dates. We're going over to Europe, October, November, December for a big European headlining tour, and then we come back January, February, March, April, June. That's next year. We have tours.
Wow. So you're a busy guy, but we will see new Divine Heresy before the test of time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just because I'm waiting for my follow-up to Bringer of Plagues. I've been waiting for it for 14 years now, I think it is, or something like that. So
it's a great record. It's killer. There's a lot of great songs, killer riffs on there. Yeah, I wrote it when I was at a Fear Factory. I wrote that record.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And it's killer fucking record to me.
Did you feel like Divine Heresy in a way was because it wasn't as conceptually driven as Fear Factory or Assesino or something like that? Did you feel like that maybe there was a little bit more freedom in that project? Because I felt like with the other two, there was sort of a theme you had to stick with.
Yeah, well, for sure. When I was doing Fear Factory, and still now, there's definitely a theme to Fear Factory. There's a certain sound to Fear Factory, correct? And I like to stick with that. But when I was doing Divine Heresy, I was like, okay, I didn't want it to sound like Fear Factory, but of course it's inspired by Fear Factory because it's still me doing it.
Yeah.
So obviously, the riffs and the beats and the vocal style. You know what I mean? But it still sounds like its own record. It doesn't sound like a Fear Factory record.
Not at all. Not at all. And I don't think and to be honest with you, I can't pigeonhole that in a genre either. If some people want to say it was sort of like metalcore-y in a way, but like I heard your podcast with Doc Coyle, he said it was like black metal. So
yeah, I didn't hear the black metal in there, even though there might have maybe been a riff or something that could possibly be black metal riff, but no, not really. To me, it was kind of more like a really fucking hard metalcore record. It's like metalcore with a little bit of death metal in it.
I think it predicted a lot of what we were going to see with the rise of Lorna Shore and Shadow of Intent and a lot of those bands that are taking off now. I think it was sort of like Lorna Shore before Lorna Shore with more melodic singing.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. But Lorna Shore to me sounds more black metal than Divine Heresy.
Fair enough. And I have two more questions for you. And I can't remember if I asked this before or not, but like with Assesino and Divine Heresy and Fear Factory, depending on what the material is about, does it resonate with you in a different way, or do you channel a different energy depending on the concept? Or in the end, it's still your right hand playing it, so it's the same strategy?
Asesino's more of a fun and more funny type lyrics. And that's kind of like, just those fun projects that you do. So I don't really, I don't focus on, when I'm writing Asesino, I definitely try to focus on like what that's going to be or what that's going to sound like, but I don't focus it on much as like Fear Factory or a Divine Heresy.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Asesino is like your most punk rock sort of body of work, as well as Brujeria.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call Asesino punk rock, but if you look, maybe the mentality of it is, you know what I mean? Definitely more inspired by death metal, you know what I mean? Death metal and black metal,
yep.
I guess you would say.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say black metal, but for sure death metal.
Yeah. Did you feel like in that you were almost portraying a character as well? Because I heard Tony was telling stories about like how you wore your masks even when you weren't like on stage.
Do I look at myself as a character? For sure. I mean, Asesino is definitely character driven, because we all are different characters. Some people know, some people don't know, but I'm Asesino, Tony's Maldito X. He wears his wrestling mask. And then our drummer, Emilio, is Sadistico, and he wears his mask. So, yeah, when we are performing Asesino, we are those characters.
Yeah.
And we try to play those characters also live as well, too.
Yep, and you do it very well. I have yet to see Asesino live, but hopefully that could change one day as well.
We did play New York back in 2000, I want to say 7 or 8.
I was in middle school, so I couldn't make it then. But
we played the BB King. Remember BB King?
Oh yeah, I went to their last metal show ever.
Yeah. So we played there. It was actually really, really packed. And I was really surprised how many people came out for that.
They banned BB King's banned metal shows for a while. I think because of a Nile show that happened there or whatever. They like did not want metal shows because of the pit or anything. But for their last show or one of their last shows, they booked that new band Igor, and people were moshing and crazy, and like people, they were pissed, but it was awesome. Yeah. And,
Oh well.
yeah.
Well, maybe people were getting hurt. Who knows?
Yeah, fair enough. Especially with like all the glass that was in that place and stuff, I could see the panic. And the final question I wanted to ask you is pertaining back to like AI and stuff. And I mentioned it, we talked about it before, but I can't stress enough on how much the lyrics to Demanufacture and Obsolete aged very well. As technology evolves more and more and more, and like life becomes more like a Fear Factory album in a way, do you feel like it's easier to grasp onto inspiration in a way because of the world that we live in?
It's kind of harder because everything we've already talked about all this in our records. You know what I mean? We already wrote lyrics about all this stuff that's happening now. So it's kind of harder because like now, what do we write about? Because now, if you write about this whole AI thing, people are going to be like, yeah, you already wrote about that. So it's going to be hard coming up with some new concepts and a new story. But if Terminator can do it, and RoboCop and Dune can all come up with new concepts, so can we.
Write an album on ChatGPT.
We'll see.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time as always, and looking forward to talking to you next year. One reason why I always like having you on the show is because I always have new things to talk about. Is there just anything else with Fear Factory or anything else you would like to promote that you're allowed to talk about at this time, of course?
Well, definitely promote our touring. So go to fearfactory.com to see all the tour dates and all the stuff that you can buy, all the tickets you can buy to go see us. So really looking forward to that. Looking forward to releasing new music next year. And I can't wait for the fans. They're going to love it. They're going to love it.
Yeah, I know we will. You never let us down, Dino. So I'm stoked. Thank you so much. Everybody, we are here with Dino of Fear Factory. Catch them on their up-and-coming tour. And if you haven't heard their latest record, Aggression Continuum, yet, be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it.